Hello, and welcome back to Kameira Koncepts. Yes, that is with a K, it is intentional. I'm your host, Kameira, and this podcast is the fun little quirks about me and my life, whether that's just being creative, or about me studying, or living in South Africa. If you like what you hear, please consider subscribing, liking, and turning on those notifications so you never miss any of my future uploads. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments and maybe I'll do a future episode on it. Alright, with all that being said, let's jump into today's topic. Alright, let's jump into today's topic, which is mistakes. And more importantly, should we be making them in the first place? In this episode, I will be discussing in 3 steps. Step 1, is making a mistake a bad thing? Step 2, what making a mistake looks like? And step 3, learning from our mistakes and growing through the experience. So let's jump off by saying that mistakes are a part of life. If you think that you should not be making them, then I would say maybe just model that belief system, because yes, society will try to tell you to be perfect every day, all your life, never to be slacking, never procrastinating, don't make mistakes. We hear it everywhere, all the time. However, we will make mistakes. We are only human. We do make them. It's just a natural process that happens. And the thing is, why do we make a mistake? What is actually a mistake? And a mistake is pretty much an act or judgment that is misguided or wrong. Also, another way you could think of it is it's an error in action, a calculation, an opinion, or judgment, caused by poor reasoning, carelessness, or you have insufficient knowledge about something. Or you have a misunderstanding or a miscommunication. So why do we keep making mistakes? Yes, we are only human, but why do we make mistakes? And I love the example that Jeremy Sherman gives on Psychology Today, where he says, think of it like this, okay? When you watch a movie or you read a nice storybook, the hero or protagonist may make mistakes, yes, but they always end up victorious in the end. Everything seems to just go as they planned, or if not, maybe much better than they even planned. However, in life, when we make a mistake, often it doesn't end up going how we picture. It's often messier and not how we thought it would happen. Things don't pan out how we think it's going to happen. It just happens differently. And he says the difference is because in a movie or a book, it's often written backwards. And I know this from past experiences when I was trying to write for fun and improve my writing skills. I noticed that many authors would tell you to write a book backwards. So you write with the victory in mind, and then you write backwards, going according to all the mistakes they will make in between until you get to the start of the book. And that's just how a book is written. It's often written from the main climax, and then it goes backwards. They would write it where the hero ends up being victorious, and then they'd go through the mistakes afterwards. However, life is not like that. No matter how hard you try, you can never predict the future. You don't know what's going to happen. We live forwards and are only able to reflect backwards. We are only able to see the mistake when we are making it. You can't predict the mistakes you will make. So we can't have this victory and then plan our life backwards. No, that's not how life works. You live forwards. And if you're faced with a problem, you'll try something. More often than not, you will make a mistake. You'll try and fix that mistake, adjust, and see how you can improve, and learn from it. And you're probably wondering why I'm talking about mistakes today. If not, that's also okay. But recently, I made quite a minor mistake, I'd say, and it made me feel so guilty and terrible and horrible. Oh, I felt so bad. But, at the end of the day, I realized I'm living forwards. I didn't realize when I woke up that morning that I'd make that mistake, and then when I made it, I adjusted and I fixed my mistake. So with that being said, are making mistakes good or are they bad? I mean, in today's society, people will tell you that making a mistake is bad. It's not a good thing. But what is good about making a mistake? Well, the good news is that you are human. Everyone is human. Everyone makes mistakes. But you have to make a mistake in order to improve and change what you thought, would work. So you thought this thing would go amazingly. It didn't. You ended up making that horrible mistake. And you change and adjust to try and fix it to not get the same result. Psychologists and scientists have studied this over the years, saying that if you are given a problem and you try and fix that problem with the same exact solution every time, you will get the same exact result. So if you want to get a different result, try a different something. It makes sense. It just makes sense. If you try something and it doesn't go how you planned, then don't worry. Don't be afraid. Just change your formula. Change what it was you were doing, and you are guaranteed different results. It may not be a success or how you pictured it, but I'm sure it will be an improvement to what your first mistake looked like. So this is then step 2. What making a mistake looks like. Because surely making a mistake is, we all do it. We all make mistakes, but what does it look like? And it got me thinking more, what does making a mistake look like in your brain? Like when you make a mistake, what does your brain do? How does your brain react? What are you thinking about? And I'm not going to sugarcoat it by saying making a mistake feels great, feels wonderful. No, more often than not, it feels horrible. When you make a mistake and you fail a test, or you are throwing a ball and you hit it through a window, you fall down on a stage when you're performing, you by accidentally mess up a recipe and you end up making a horrible cake. Like the one time when I was really small, I mixed up the salt and the sugar, and I ended up putting way more salt into a pancake batter than I intended. Needless to say, we couldn't eat those pancakes, but I learned from my mistake. Never mess up salt and sugar again. I mean, now every time if I'm not sure, I'll just take like a little bit and taste it to see if it's salt or sugar, because, yeah. But what's important is I learned from that mistake. So what does making a mistake look like? And I did some research and I came across a very interesting article on Frontiers for Young Minds, and I'll link the website below if you want to read more about it. But they were using an EEG, which is something that scans your brain because your brain emits electricity. Scientists were doing this, and they were able to observe the brain through this technology, and they found very interesting thing that when a person makes a mistake, an error-related negativity, or an ERN, is released, and then a few seconds later an error positivity is released. So what's so interesting about this, you might say? Well, an ERN is released at around about 100 milliseconds after you make the mistake, and you yourself only register about 200 milliseconds after you make the mistake, which is when the error positivity occurs. So in theory, your brain knows you are making a mistake before you do. Like before you are aware you are making the mistake, your brain knows that you are making the mistake, and then it tries to correct that mistake quickly, which then causes you to make the mistake, if that makes sense. So it's like you're trying to fix it while you're making the mistake, and then you don't, pretty much. That's pretty crazy to think about, that your brain knows you are making a mistake before you are even aware you are making the mistake. And this got me thinking, so what's another mistake I made in my life recently? And one particular really funny incident came to mind. Again, to do with baking, because I made a lot of those. But this one was particularly hilarious, but it turned out really well in the end, and I'm really glad I did actually make this mistake. It didn't feel like it at the time, but now looking back, it's pretty funny. So what happened was I was invited to a friend's party, and I decided to, we had to bring treats and whatever. It was like a bring and share kind of casual party, and because I hadn't been to a party in like 2 years because Rona, I was very excited, and I wanted to make this recipe that I hadn't made in like 3 years, because I just hadn't seen anyone, so there's no need for me to make it. So because I hadn't made this recipe, I forgot that when I was making it, I altered the recipe a little bit, because I found that when I was following the recipe, the ganache, which is the topping, never worked out. It always ended up being slightly grainy, and it didn't work out. So I altered the recipe myself back then, but I'd forgotten to write it down. So me forgetting that I'd altered the recipe made the recipe, and needless to say, it ended up being a failure. It was just not fun. It was I don't know how to describe it. It became grainy and really bad. Like if you could think chocolate was grainy and oily and just didn't. No, it was bad. I was like, okay, this is a real massive mistake, fail. You could call it that. So I decided to just start from scratch. And this time I used my intuition, all my baking knowledge, and I made it perfectly the second time. I made the ganache really well, went fabulous, and I learned from my mistake by quickly writing down the recipe that I had just done, so that the next time I have to make this, I will never forget what I did to make it perfect, So I'm not gonna lie, when I did make that mistake, I was pretty sad. I was like, oh, why? This chocolate is so good, and it's good quality. I mean, it didn't taste bad, it just looked really bad, So I decided that I'm gonna do something experimental. Why don't I try and fix this mistake? Because after all, mistakes happen. We're all human. Just because you make a mistake doesn't mean you're any less valuable. And what's more important is that you learn, you try and fix the error that you made. So I was like, okay, how can I fix this? Which then leads us into step 3, learning from the mistake and growing through this experience. So growing through this experience, what did I learn? I learned, okay, I need to write it down, what I did right. But then I had this mistake sitting, the granulated chocolate, the horrible chocolate that I'd made that was no longer a ganache. I was like, how can I fix this? How can I turn this into something edible that at least looks nice, And it got me thinking. The texture kind of resembled a cookie inside, and I was thinking, okay, I know how to make a microwave cake, like Oreo microwave cake from TikTok. I mean, everyone pretty much knows that. So I was like, what if I try and make a cake from this? Because, I mean, it's already a mess. What more can I do, So I put in a few ingredients, I did a few things, and I put it in the microwave. And when I pulled it out, it looked exactly like a cake. And I was so happy. I was like, yes, finally I've made this failure of a mistake into something positive. And you know what was interesting? Was then I tried it, and the taste and the texture was exactly like fudge. I'm not kidding. So I had just made cake fudge, and I was quite impressed because I was like, wow, I have never seen anyone make a cake fudge in their life. I'm sure they're out there somewhere, but this looked legit like cake, like chocolate cake, and it tasted exactly like fudge. Its texture was exactly like fudge. Its texture and its taste. And I was like, well, that's amazing. I learned from my mistake by writing down the recipe to my advantage so that I'll never forget that. And I've sort of made another new recipe in case I mess up again and I forget and I make this mistake again, then I can just fiddle around and make this cake fudge again. So really, it was a bad situation that turned out good, and it was amazing, and I had so much fun, and it's pretty funny looking back at it now. At the time I was going, oh no, I made this terrible mistake, but now I'm looking back, I'm like, yeah, I made a good thing out of a bad situation. So therefore, it's good to say it's actually okay to make mistakes. At the beginning of the episode, we were asking, is it okay? And truly thinking back, I think it is okay. It's perfectly normal to make a mistake. You are only human, after all. It's natural. But what's important is what you learn from that experience. What you changed to make a better outcome. You will stumble and fall, because at the end of the day, you live forwards and you reflect backwards. So you can only live forwards and reflect backwards and take all the knowledge you've experienced, even if you have just made a mistake, reflecting backwards, going, okay, I made that mistake. How can I improve? What did I do wrong? What can I change? How can I be better? Yes, you will make mistakes, but staying in the same place and just trying over and over again in the same way is not going to change anything. So we live forwards and reflect backwards. And what's important is that you learn from this experience and you grow. Well, that's it for today's episode. If you found value in today's podcast, then like and share the video with family and friends. Subscribe to my channel for future content, and if you have any questions, then please leave them in the comments, and maybe I'll answer them in the future Koncepts video. Once again, this has been Kameira Koncepts. I'm your host Kameira, signing out. Bye!